Today I'm doing a tag video. Although I don't know if this is an official tag or not, but Robert Jones from Story Detective tagged me on Instagram to share the moment that I got bit by the writing bug, or the moment that I figured out I was supposed to be a writer. So I guess this could be titled the unofficial writer bug story tag, maybe. Robert, if you're watching this, maybe we should make that the official title. If there's not one already. Dylan, cue the intro. What's up? My name is Alyssa. I am a writer, editor, and I recently started my own publishing company called Kingdom Books. And here on this channel, we talk about all the things pertaining to books and building our best life. So yeah, if you're into that kind of thing, go ahead and subscribe. That would be cool. So as I said before, today I am sharing my story of how I found out I was supposed to be a writer, or when I got bit by the writer bug and decided that I really wanted to take this seriously. It starts off, as many writer stories do, not extremely original. I feel like a lot of us have said that I've been writing ever since I could hold a pencil, or I mean, I know that's not everybody. I have just heard a lot of people say that, like, as soon as they knew how to start writing stories, they started writing stories. And that's basically what I can remember as well. I grew up with my mom. She read a lot of books to me growing up, so I sort of had that inbuilt love of story just like bred into me from a child. And when I figured out how to write them on my own, I did. I didn't start off coming up with my own stories that I remember. Like the very first stories I remember writing, I watched like a lot of Pokemon when I was younger, and I would take my favorite episodes and I would rewrite the episode but in a story form, and sometimes I would make changes to it, but like not even all the time though. A lot of times I would just like rewrite the entire story in a story form. So I don't know like what kind of weird form of fan fiction that is, but I wanted what I saw on the TV to be a readable story. So that's what I would do. I would rewrite my favorite episodes, changing very little detail. And so those are like the very first stories that I can remember writing. After that, I started coming up with my own short stories. There are two stories that I came up with that I remember writing as well. The first one was about a brother and a sister, and they had grandparents who owned their own grocery store, and one day they were like spending the day with their grandparents, and it was closing time. Grandpa closed up the shop, locked it, ended up leaving the grandkids behind, and this brother and sister had to survive the night in the grocery store by themselves. So that was one of the first stories I can remember writing. The other one was about a girl who got really upset at her parents and decided she was going to move into the backyard and build a treehouse and live in the treehouse. So yeah, I've been writing since a very young age. Ever since like I can remember writing, I've been writing stories. But I think one of the things that happens a lot to creative people just in general is like you get really passionate about this creative gift that you have. And people ask you like, what do you want to be when you grow up? And you want to be like, I want to be an author, I want to make movies, whatever. And people are like, oh, that's really cool, but like, what do you really want to do? Like, how are you gonna pay your bills? One of the things I heard a lot was that like, authors like normally have a second job, like they normally have their job that makes money, and then they write books too. And when you hear that enough times, it starts to get really discouraging. It gets like in your brain and starts to mess with you and what your expectations are. So all throughout high school and middle school and whatnot, I still wrote stories, but it became more of a hobby for me, and it wasn't something that I was taking very seriously, in the sense that I thought, like, I knew that I wanted to be a published author one day, but I didn't seriously pursue, like, I wasn't researching the industry. I wasn't thinking that that would be my main source of income. I was thinking that it would be something that would happen. Maybe I publish 1 or 2 books, and like, the dream is to like go on tour and do all that, but like it was definitely like a dream. It wasn't a goal. So as that was happening, I kind of started to develop other passions. And one of the things for me when I graduated high school and started college was I really wanted to teach English in South Korea. I'm a Christian. I felt like I was being, like, God was calling me to South Korea for some reason. And I didn't really understand why, but I started to get really, really interested in Korean culture, like not just K-pop and all that, but I was like learning about, just like cultural society type things from people who lived there and whatnot. So that was all while I was in college, but I still like couldn't get away from writing. I decided to become an English major because I went into college not knowing what my major would be. I honestly was like trying to keep an open mind. I had a lot of different things that I like thought I could go into, but I took my first couple English classes and I was like, I gotta do this. Like I love English. So I ended up getting my major in English. I had an emphasis in creative writing, and afterwards I took a year off from school and worked at a grocery store full time and decided like I need to do something more than this. It's not stimulating for me. I got to do something more. So again, I kind of started to think back about South Korea, because if you have your English degree, your bachelor's in English, there's basically like one main job that people do with that, and it's teach English. So I didn't feel comfortable just like going to South Korea with my bachelor's degree, even though I could have. That's like the minimum requirement. So I ended up going into education, and I got my teaching credential in the US and got my started my master's degree in education with an emphasis in teaching English. I got TESOL certified and ended up going to South Korea. And that was a really, really, really tough year. That and like the next few years after that when I came home were some of the toughest years that I've had in my almost 30-year-old life. But yeah, so I got to South Korea, and I had been researching South Korea for, at that point, it would have been like 6 years. I was like keeping updated on it, like changes and whatnot, and like I was so into South Korean culture. But like the thing about researching South Korean culture at that time, like watching people's videos on YouTube and even like reading books about it and whatnot, most of the information has to do with if you're living in a city, because like, that's where most of the people live. That's where most of the stuff happens. I was not prepared to go to rural South Korean countryside and teach English there, which like even like rural countryside there is not quite like rural countryside here. It was very different than what I was expecting. So it was like a double culture shock sort of thing, and very different to what like I'm used to with my standard of living here in like San Diego, California. Very different. I got placed in this town called Muguk, except, well, it's actually not even a town, it's called a township. So like a very tiny town. You could walk the whole thing in a day. And like that was over here, we'll say, on this imaginary map that I'm drawing. And then there was like a road this way, boop, like way over here. There was one apartment building with one single 7-Eleven in front of it that was about the size of a studio apartment. And my school was in that little town called Muguk, and my apartment was on the only thing like on this road that bridged over to like an even smaller town that I never even went to. So I wasn't used to having to take the bus. The bus system, like if you go to Seoul, it's amazing. It's precisely on time and it's great. The buses in the countryside aren't as strict about the time, so it was about a 10-minute bus ride, but you like really, if you had to be somewhere on time, it was kind of difficult because like you didn't know when the bus was going to show up necessarily. I remember one time I was waiting out there for like 2 hours waiting for the bus to come, and then finally I was like, screw it. It was about an hour and a half walk for me. So yeah, so I wasn't used to that sort of like distance at all. And I drive in the US, and the subway system in Seoul, like if I had that, would have been amazing, but was not used to this whole like waiting for a bus that may or may not come, or like deciding to walk an hour and a half into town to like get the things you need or to go to your job and whatnot. But it was more of like the extreme isolation that super got to me. I was like the only foreigner in my apartment complex. I made 2 friends over there, and I hung out with them sometimes, and that was really nice. But I was also in a really unhealthy it was a long-term, a really unhealthy long-distance relationship, and so I was experiencing isolation from that, like emotional and social isolation from that, plus being isolated in a country that I wasn't used to, plus like my actual apartment being physically isolated, and it really, really got to me. I developed really bad depression. There were days where I would like be laying on my bed for just like 8 hours with YouTube on, just like listening to this drone, and like I'd be a complete vegetable. My apartment was a mess. My best friend for a few weeks was a cockroach that lived in my bathroom. Oh yeah. And until I told my mom, and then she was like, "What are you doing? You have to kill that thing." So I ended up killing my best friend. Desperate times call for desperate measures. I saw Wall-E. It didn't seem so weird at the time, but now that I recount the story, I'm like, wow, that's pretty desperate. And so it really messed with me on a faith level too, because I went to Korea thinking like God had called me there, and I was like, why am I so miserable if this was the case? And I started developing anxiety there too. I would get panic attacks, and my poor neighbors, like there, I would scream, cry several nights, a lot of nights, especially when I first moved there, and they were probably freaking out. So yeah, really, really hard time. But through that time, about 3 or 4 months before I was supposed to leave, the story started really like developing. I brought the Percy Jackson series with me, and I began to think it would be really cool to write a story like this, but like with older characters using the zodiac signs. So the story had kind of been building in me, and like 4 months before I was going to leave, I started writing. And that writing like brought me back to myself. It like was a total anchor for me. I did not feel like myself at all for like the first, I can't math, but 12 minus 4 months that I was there. And when I would like delve into this story and start developing the characters and start outlining the plot, I felt like me again. And I'd also found Jenna Moresi in like copious hours of watching YouTube, and she was the one that showed me that if you treat your writing like a business, you can actually make a living out of it. So it was sort of this convergence where I was rediscovering this passion that like had always been a part of me, and also learning how to make money with it, and learning that it could be a viable career option. And those two things both happened like at the same time. So I guess you could say I got bitten by the writing bug in Korea in 2016, because that's when I really started to take it seriously, even though I had written books and stories and hadn't stopped doing it. But that was the moment when I really realized that I am a writer, and it is like just built into me. Like it's an integral part of the fabric of what makes Alyssa. And if I hadn't gone to Korea, I really don't think I ever would have realized that. I don't think I ever would have had like such a deep connection to that part of me, and such like a deep conviction that we're given these gifts for a reason. We're given these creative gifts for a reason, and we can't escape them. And if we can't escape them, like just that means you should go after it, and that you should figure out a way to make it work. So yeah, that is my getting bit by the writing bug story. Who knew that writing bugs lived in South Korea? I certainly did not. If you're watching this video, I need to tag some people. Who should I tag? If you're watching this video and you have like your I got bit by the writing bug moment, I definitely tag you to share your story, because I think these stories are really impactful and inspiring for people who are watching them, especially for people who are like, maybe trying to find their identity in that sort of area. So if you're watching this and you have a writing story, I tag you. Specifically, we'll do Melissa Fry and Leilani Lopez. So yeah, I tag you guys. And that's all. That's all I got for today. If you like this video, go ahead and give it a thumbs up. And if you would like to receive weekly content about all the things pertaining to books and building your best life, go ahead and subscribe. Videos go up every Wednesday. Thank you so much for watching this video, and until next time, bye!